Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge? Are you a textualist?
Yeah, I don't label myself, but yeah, I definitely look at the text first and foremost to divine the meaning of a statute.
My understanding of is that one definition of a textualist is that you must take a statute. You look at the statute. And if it's unambiguous, you apply the words. Is that right?
That's exactly how I understand it, Senator.
Okay. How unambiguous? Well, let me put it another. How ambiguous do the words have to be in order for you to look behind the words? Is it 51% ambiguous or 100% or 67%?
Senator, that's an absolutely great question. And we see that manifest itself with Chevron deference when it talks about ambiguous statutes when you go from step 1 to step 2, if it's ambiguous when you go. And that's actually a somewhat hard question to answer because sometimes different judges have different commitments in terms of degree of ambiguity. My view is this. We have a rich tradition of looking at the text, at the structure, and applying canons of construction to statutes. I wouldn't look beyond those until all of those traditional tools have been exhausted.
Well, let's suppose words have different meanings to different people. Let's suppose that to you, the statute that Congress, for example, has passed is clearly unambiguous. Would you never look behind the words to see why Congress passed the statute if the words were clearly unambiguous to you?
If I believe that they were clearly unambiguous, I would not take any initiative to do that. Now, okay. I assume the parties would brief Congress's purpose, and I'd read their briefs.
But you got to ignore that if you're purely a textualist. So I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just trying to understand how you think.
Yeah.
Let's suppose Congress passed a law, and the law said all printing by the federal government must be awarded to the highest bidder. All printing by the federal government must be awarded to the highest bidder. That's pretty clear. Let's suppose that GAO did a study, and they found that if we did our printing in-house, we could save $50 billion a year. Could we do our printing in-house?
As I read that statute, no, I don't think that's possible. I might add that my wife is an alum of the GAO, and she's very familiar with those sorts of studies.
Yeah, they did good work. Well, suppose you looked at the legislative history and it was clear that the Congress was referring to instances where the printing was offered to the private sector to bid on. And that the problem they were trying to solve is that some agencies were not awarding the bids when they were given to an outside party to the lowest bidder. Well, wouldn't it be nonsensical not to look at the policy?
Well, you know, Senator, one of the problems that happens when a judicial body relies on something other than the ambiguous text of a statute is it makes it harder for Congress to make corrective action. If Congress passed a statute that says all printing and a judge says that doesn't mean all printing, I assume that you and your colleagues would say, what doesn't this judge understand? It said all printing.
No, we wouldn't, because if you looked at the legislative history, you would see that we weren't saying government couldn't do its own printing. We were saying if you're going to give it to the private sector, you can't give somebody a brother-in-law deal.
And what that would mean...
And all you got to do is like go to the committee report and look at the floor debate. And there it is, big as Dallas.
Well, I think that there's two responses I have to that. One, text is usually easier to decipher than legislative history. And
True.
Two, I think that...
Sometimes it's more ambiguous.
Usually, it tends to be, I think is the direction that I'm going. But I think, too, by judges sticking to the text, that allows for Congress to be very, very receptive and very, very responsive and say, that's not what we meant. And you can change that very quickly through the political process that is politically accountable. And I think that that makes a lot of sense. And I know that America and Congress has a very rich tradition of doing so. And as
Of being responsive, Congress?
yes, I think
You're
so.
being kind. I'm out of time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.